can also remember a point where, and it sounds cliched, I came to terms with dying.
From the front lines to the front of the grid, a lot has changed for Major Steve McCulley as he prepares to make his debut in the 2018 British GT Championship with Invictus Games Racing, 7 years after being blown up by the Taliban.
My name's Steve McCulley and I'm one of the racing drivers in Invictus Games Racing. I've always been interested in cars ever since I was a young boy. I was brought up around cars. My dad used to buy and sell cars and do them up and I'd help. But my career took a very different direction. I joined the Marines. And so I suppose, motorsport was never on the agenda, really, because I thought it wasn't going to be possible. And it was only after I got injured, my aspirations to race in motorsport became a reality.
McCulley joined the Royal Marines straight from school, achieving a feat no one had done in over 4 years.
I was due to do a degree in mechanical engineering, but a friend of mine who was a little bit older, he'd passed out Marines training and I went to his passing out parade and thought it looked seriously cool right up my street, and so I went to a careers office and said I want to join the Marines, and I said I want to join as an officer because I want a decent car and they obviously get paid more money, and that was the only reason why. I hadn't really done much thinking about it. The careers officer said you've got no chance of being an officer without a degree, go and get a degree. And I said but you can, there's nothing stopping, you just need A-levels and GCSEs as per their regs. And he said yeah, but no one's done it for 4 years, go and get a degree and come back. And that kind of, I think, made me even more want to try and do it. So I said, well, give me a try. If I don't get in, I'll go and get a degree, and if I do get in, then it doesn't matter. And yeah, 6 months later, I was selected to start training.
Having passed out of Marines training, Steve went on his first tour of Afghanistan in 2007. A year later, at only 29 years old, he was promoted to Major, the youngest anyone can become that rank. But it was during his second tour when his life got turned upside down.
Back in 2011, I was a company commander, so I was a major in the Royal Marines, in command of about 175 personnel. And it was our job in Afghanistan, Helmand province. Well, it was twofold. The main role was to provide security and assistance to the local population and the local Afghan police and army. We also had a secondary role, which was the ability to neutralise the threat from the insurgents. And for that role, I could deploy up to 100 personnel at a time on discrete operations. And it was during one of these operations, about 10 weeks into the tour, that I was severely injured by an improvised explosive device. It was what's called a directional fragmentation charge, and so it was placed in the side of an irrigation ditch. So whereas the majority of the IEDs were buried in the ground, this one was attached to a wire about 200 foot long, and there were 2 Taliban that were watching me. They'd worked out I was the commander and they were waiting for me to walk past, and then they detonated it. It kind of blew me into the irrigation ditch. I had big holes in my chest, leg, arm. But it's a chest injury that was the life-threatening injury. The shrapnel from the IED basically blew a big hole in the right-hand side of my chest, fractured 6 ribs, and tore my right lung apart. And so yeah, I can remember everything. I can remember lying there. I can remember the guys dragging me out of the ditch, and I can also remember a point where, it sounds cliched, I came to terms with dying. All the pain disappeared, and I was in a lot of pain, and it started to go dark, tunnel vision, and I just thought, okay, this is it, I'm going now. I think the next thing is one of the guys was slapping me around the face saying, you're not going to sleep, stay awake, and then the helicopter came in. And so I can remember then being carried onto the helicopter, and I remember lying on the floor of the helicopter, and there was this guy looking over me, and it had an aircrew helmet on, but it said doctor across the top, so he was obviously one of the surgeons on board the helicopter, and I just shouted, please put me to sleep. And I remember him saying, this is going to hurt, but you'll be all right. And then they drilled ketamine straight into my bone marrow, and that was me out. So they did life-saving surgery in Afghanistan, flew me back to the UK, and because my body was in such a bad state, they just basically kept me alive for 3 weeks. Fortunately, I came out of that, or my body started to heal, so they brought me out of the induced coma, and then my rehabilitation started.
With his injuries ending his military career, Planning for the future was the top priority for the Hampshire man. Having represented both the Marines and the Navy on two wheels, working with bikes became an appealing prospect.
So whilst I was in rehabilitation and after my physio had given me some blunt and harsh advice, but very useful, that my military career would be over, I immediately started thinking about what I was going to do with my life. One of the key things I wanted to be able to do was run my own diary, and I therefore realised that I had to be my own boss, and that meant setting up my own business. If you're going to have any marginal success in business, it needs to be something you're passionate about. Cycling was my passion. I couldn't cycle anymore, but I thought, well, I want to do something within the industry. And all the bikes I used to race on, I used to build myself. I'd get all the parts in and do it myself. So I went down the bespoke route and bike fitting, and I did a lot of specialist courses, which I was very lucky to be supported by the charities, and they paid for a lot of my courses. Help for Heroes were amazing at supporting me, the Royal Marines charity. And I actually created my own brand. I named it Leos after my kids, Lily and Oscar. And we're nearly 6 years on, and Leos is still going. It's changed shape a few times, but it's gone well.
Despite having a love for cycling, Steve wanted to try out his other passion, racing. A chance meeting with Mission Motorsport's founder James Cameron got the wheels on his motorsport career turning.
I got introduced by a mutual friend to the founder of Mission Motorsport, Jim Cameron. He said, look, we've not long set up Mission Motorsport. Our aim is to get guys and girls into the motorsport industry, mainly vocational, work experience, qualifications, and jobs at the end of the day, ideally. And the shiny part of it was track days and racing. And I said, well, look, I'd like to get into the Caterham racing scene. And I was going to use some of my compensation money. And he said, look, don't go using your compensation money on that yet. You may not like it, you may not be very good, or whatever. Get involved with the charity, and then you'll get an idea, do some track days, and then we can give you some advice, tips, coaching. It may not be for you, but it might be. At least then you can make the decision, which was great.
Having caught the racing bug, the next step for McCulley was to find a drive, and he even went the extra mile to ensure that he found himself on the starting grid.
At the beginning of 2014 at the Motorsport show, Jim introduced me to the guys at Caterham. They had one academy car left for the racing season that year, and they said to the charity, if we don't sell that car, then you choose someone from the charity and they can race in the academy year in 2014. And I was very fortunate to have got chosen. I basically went and did my racing license with all the other guys that had signed up to do the Caterham Academy that year. And unfortunately, the following day, Caterham told me, look, we're really sorry, but we'd actually sold that last car. 2 weeks later, though, I then had a phone call from Mission Motorsport, and they said, look, Caterham have been on to us. And they said, here's a kit to build a race car. So the charity said to me, right, there you go. If you can build that car in 2 weeks, you can race. And so I built the Caterham race car on my own in 49 hours, over 6 days.
McCulley adapted to the championship quickly, earning a 50% podium finish rate in just 4 seasons, and a 70% podium rate in 2017 alone. Now for 2018, he takes up a new challenge. I'm
incredibly excited about the new challenge of racing in British GT for Invictus Games Racing. I did do fairly well in the Caterham Championships. I was actually trying to blow my own smoke. I was classed as a privateer. I had minimal budget, just enough to basically get into the races. So I didn't have any money for coaching or instruction. It was just all off my own back. It's not lost on me the fact that this is a seriously different league of racing. So I'm not going in thinking that I'm going to be on the podium as much as I was in Caterham. Although, never say never.
Hello and welcome to a wet Alton Park for the season opener of the 2018 British GT Championship. We are ready for the first of 2 races here at the traditional Bank Holiday Monday season opener for the British GT Championship. one of the brand new Jaguar F-Types, Invictus Games sponsored backed cars, which is in 30th place. And that's been driven by Steve McCulley.
Major Steve McCulley, former Caterham racer. Once he left military service, took up his next passion, which was motorsport, came from the Caterham Academy and now stepping up to racing at this level.
It's seriously treacherous out there, real baptism of fire, and we'd been testing in the wet before, but you know, the rain was something else. It's a case of just being as cautious and safe as possible, bring the car back in one piece. It's an extremely positive weekend. I think, for me personally, I learned a hell of a lot. We did as a car, as a team, both cars, everyone learned from the weekend. This is it's a project that's been created in really short order from, Jaguar, David Appleby Engineering, James Holder, the founder, whose, kind of inspiration it was. Everyone involved's been up against it time-wise. I definitely feel as though motorsport is I'm not going to say a new life, but it's certainly a new career. Off the back of Invictus Games racing, hopefully this goes on as long as it can do. We don't know how long the project's going to last, or the race team. I want to be as part of that as long as I can. It's an amazing opportunity, and I'm grasping it with both hands.